The tale begins amidst a battlefield drenched in blood. Countless warriors have perished, and only one remains standing, our protagonist. His comrades, his friends, all fallen in this brutal fight. As he surveys the desolate scene once more, the realization hits him. This place will be their vast graveyard. Struggling just to catch his breath, he hears a voice. It soon becomes clear to him that this voice belongs to their greatest enemy, one he hadn't expected to still be alive. This being, brimming with wings, is called a Hyatt, one of the titans responsible for the destruction ravaging this land. These titans had only appeared in the world 20 days prior, yet in that brief span, they'd unleashed chaos without any apparent purpose. Humanity, unable to fathom their motives, had nonetheless fought valiantly to stop them. The protagonist, seething with anger, blames a Hyatt for the downfall of the Empire. In response, a Hyatt tells him that his own time is nearly up and that he will soon return to someone's side. Feigning confidence, our protagonist informs a Hyatt that the other two titans had also been slain. The second had been incinerated by a fiery-tempered red dragon, reduced to ash by its scorching breath. The last titan had been sealed away for eternity by a wise old man named Ronan. He hoped his words might strike fear into a Hyatt, making the titans reconsider facing humanity. But his bluff failed. A Hyatt reveals that the titans share their senses, and it was no one-sided battle. The warriors who fought the other titans perished alongside them, meaning the last defenders of the world were gone. The protagonist rejects this notion, insisting that he still lives and can fight. But a Hyatt is aware of the extent of his injuries. It knows that he too is nearing his end. The giant remarks that, had the protagonist realized his true potential earlier and honed it, he would have posed a far greater threat to their plans. But these regrets come too late. The protagonist already knows he's led a life full of mistakes, and he no longer wants to hear the Titan's words. Despite this, a Hyatt commends him for his accomplishments, saying he should feel proud, even if it's all in vain. This world is doomed to be swallowed by starlight. Before a Hyatt can finish, the protagonist cuts its speech short, quite literally, by severing the Titan's head with a powerful strike. The blow is strong enough to decapitate the enormous creature. Yet, even as he stands over his fallen foe, his gaze remains cold. He knows that what's done is done. With his adrenaline fading, he finally feels the full extent of his injuries. He could hardly catch his breath. Memories of the first time he met his comrades flooded his mind. The first to approach him was a man with a scar over his eye. Soon, the others followed, welcoming him into their ranks. They had fought countless battles together, but now, they were all gone. The protagonist wondered why they chose to come to this perilous place, even though they knew the risks were too great. His anger simmered as he realized their actions were driven by pride, a reckless decision that had cost them everything. But it was too late for regrets. One question gnawed at him. Why was he the only one capable of hurting these monstrous beings? These titans could deflect even the Empire's most powerful sword techniques, yet his blade alone could penetrate their defenses. The regret weighed heavily on him. If only he had known earlier, maybe more lives could have been spared. He lowered his head in despair, feeling utterly defeated. Just then, a faint voice reached his ears. Startled, he moved quickly, recognizing the familiar sound. To his astonishment, someone had survived the massacre. Leaning against a massive boulder, he saw a woman, though she was in bad shape herself. Relief washed over him as he realized it was the Grand Commander, Aesan, the leader of this doomed mission to destroy the Titan. Ronan, the protagonist, couldn't help but tease her about her condition, to which she retorted, pointing out that he didn't look much better. It was here that the story revealed our protagonist's name, Ronan. Aesan, trying to gauge the situation, asked if a Hyatt had been defeated. Ronan confirmed, saying he had slain the giant. Tears welled in her eyes as she thanked him for his efforts. Ronan was taken aback to see his commander in such a vulnerable state. Trying to lighten the mood, he made a request. He asked Aesan to ensure that all the fallen on the battlefield received proper burials. Typically, in wars like this, the dead were either abandoned or burned, but Ronan didn't want that fate for his comrades. However, Aesan confessed that she wasn't sure she could fulfill his wish. She was too weak to handle such a task. She even suggested that Ronan might be better suited for it, but that idea was quickly dismissed when Ronan erupted into a fit of coughing. He admitted that he too was on the brink of death and had been putting on a brave face, knowing full well there was little he could do now. Aesan then asked what Ronan would do if, by some miracle, he survived this day. Ronan thought for a moment, but only one answer came to mind. He shared that he wanted to attend the academy. The reason for this desire came from something a Hyatt had said, about him never having fully developed his abilities. But the real reason was deeper. This had been his late sister's wish. She had always wanted him to pursue studies at the academy. Yet, Ronan now felt it was irrelevant, believing he would soon be reunited with his sister in the afterlife. Aesan tried to reassure him, confident that a rescue party must be on its way, but Ronan dismissed her hope, calling it futile. As they awaited their impending deaths, A brilliant light suddenly blazed from above, startling them both. They wondered why the storm had abruptly ceased, but the calm was soon replaced by an overwhelming pressure that filled the air. Ronan struggled to grasp what was happening until he glanced up at the sky and saw it. A massive giant with 8 wings. But it wasn't alone. A host of other titans accompanied it, similar to the ones that had nearly exterminated humanity. Ahayat had been one of them, and now they had returned, this time in full force. Ronan stood, bewildered, questioning where these creatures had come from. Adeshan's last shred of hope crumbled. She had believed the defeat of the first 3 giants was the end, but she now realized that wasn't true. Despite having tried to save the world 3 times, she was out of options. Confusion and despair overtook her, leaving her paralyzed. But Ronan's voice broke through her despair. He urged her to use her telekinesis to help his sword reach the giants, as it couldn't reach them on its own. Aesan was stunned by Ronan's resolve. She couldn't fathom how he still planned to fight, even against such overwhelming odds. Yet, Ronan unsheathed his sword and vowed to do everything in his power to repel the titans. His unwavering determination stirred a flicker of hope within her. She began to believe that Ronan might be the key to defeating them after all. She called out to him, and as he turned to face her, she told him to stop talking, then did something completely unexpected. Aesan produced a glowing blue orb from her mouth and transferred it into Ronan. He was bewildered and had no idea what this was for. As Aesan leaned closer, she whispered something into his ear. Ronan, confused, tried to ask more questions, but she continued whispering. When she finished, Ronan exclaimed in shock, demanding to know what she had just done. But his expression changed when he heard her final request. She asked Ronan that if they ever met again, he should remind her not to do anything foolish and instead to remain a simple tailor. Her last words froze Ronan in place. But before he could react, the giants behind them began casting a spell. For the first time, he saw a gentle smile on Adeshan's face. A brilliant, blinding light surged toward them, and the spell struck with full force. In the aftermath, the only thing left was the blue orb Aesan had passed to Ronan. When Ronan opened his eyes again, everything had changed. The sky was clear and blue, and he was no longer surrounded by the corpses of the fallen. His surroundings had transformed into peaceful fields. Nearby, children played along a riverbank. Ronan quickly realized what had happened. He was back in Nabos, his hometown. This marked the beginning of his return to the past, the first day of his regression. His head throbbed with the weight of all that had transpired. Adeshan's parting words echoed in his mind. Before the giant's attack, she had done something extraordinary. She had given him the blue orb, a powerful artifact capable of turning back time. She had also told him about her previous life, when she had been nothing more than an ordinary tailor. The orb had allowed her to regress, giving her the chance to change the course of history, and it was through this power that she had risen to become the Grand Commander of the Empire. But the orb only allowed 4 regressions, and Aesan had already used 3. The final chance now belonged to Ronan. She believed that the power to defeat the giants rested in Ronan's hands. He was the key to preventing the world's collapse. Aesan also whispered to him that this opportunity would give him the time he needed to hone his skills and achieve his dream of attending the academy. She mentioned the best place for him to train, Philin Academy, a renowned institution filled with people who could help him grow stronger. As a parting request, she asked Ronan to remind her, if they ever met again, to follow her dream of becoming a tailor. In the present, Ronan was still grappling with disbelief. He thought it might all be a dream and tried to wake himself, unsure of what to do if this was reality. But as he processed everything, a crucial thought crossed his mind. Grabbing a stick nearby, Ronan sprinted home. This was the time when his sister was still alive. He hurried through the crowd, excitement filling him as he anticipated seeing her again. A smile spread across his face, but as he ran, something caught his attention, forcing him to stop. A group of young boys was tormenting another child, who was hanging upside down. Ronan sighed in frustration, recognizing these bullies. They hadn't changed even in the past. He considered continuing on his way, but something unusual drew his eye. The boy wasn't suspended by a rope, it was magic. Ronan scanned the area, searching for the magic user, knowing that this kind of ability was rare and highly valuable in battle. Then he spotted a red-haired boy controlling the spell. The red-haired child looked weary, unsure of how long he could maintain the magic. Ronan realized that if this went on, the hanging boy could be seriously hurt. The victim begged the bullies to let him go, explaining that he didn't have any money and that his mother's medicine for the month had been too expensive. The leader of the group, a golden-haired boy, sneered and struck the child, telling him that if he wanted to be a good son, he should have earned more money. The other boys laughed and watched as the cruelty unfolded. The leader then ordered the red-haired boy to lift the victim higher into the tree. The magic user hesitated, trying to protest, but the golden-haired bully wouldn't hear it. Intimidated, the red-haired boy obeyed out of fear that he, too, would become a target. This boy's name was Asel, and as he complied, he reflected on how he ended up in this mess. It had all started with his desire to prove to everyone that he was skilled at magic. Asel's hands trembled. He wanted to refuse the bully's order, to stand up to him, but his fear paralyzed him. Just as Asel was about to speak up, a sudden blow interrupted the situation. Ronan had struck him with a stick, telling him to stop using his magic. Asel lost concentration, and the suspended boy fell to the ground. Enraged, the bully turned on Asel, but before he could act, Ronan stepped in. He told Asel to ignore the bully and focus on talking to him instead. Ronan asked Asel where he had learned to use telekinesis magic, curious despite the unfolding tension. Asel sheepishly explained that he had bought a cheap grimoire from a traveling merchant. Ronan was impressed. Such a rare ability from something inexpensive. He realized that magic like this could be essential in his fight against the giants. However, before he could dwell further on the idea, a familiar sound interrupted his thoughts. The golden-haired bully had drawn his sword, and the situation was about to escalate. The bully was livid, feeling humiliated as Ronan kept ignoring him. In a fit of rage, he charged at Ronan with his sword, but Ronan remained unfazed. He didn't feel threatened by a young boy wielding a weapon, and even wondered how the boy had come into possession of a longsword. Ronan quickly noticed the bully's poor stance and weak technique. The attack was clumsy, and Ronan easily dodged it, much to the bully's shock. Despite being back in his younger body, Ronan's battle instincts from his previous life remained sharp. The golden-haired bully, embarrassed by his failure, tried to save face. He claimed that Ronan had been lucky and offered to spare his life if he showed some respect. His words were nothing more than empty threats, but when the bully insulted Ronan's sister, suggesting he'd take care of her if Ronan died, it was the final straw. Without hesitation, Ronan swung the wooden stick he held, landing with a precise blow. Blood flowed as the bully's ear was struck, leaving him in a state of shock. It took a few moments for him to realize what had happened before he dropped his sword and began to scream in pain. The other boys, terrified by what they had just witnessed, froze. Ronan approached the bully with a cold, serious expression, making it clear who had won. The bully knew he had made a grave mistake, and though his companions wanted to help him, they were too afraid to approach Ronan, who had just disarmed their leader using nothing but a wooden stick. Ronan then turned to the remaining boys, warning them to flee if they didn't want to suffer the same fate. Before they could escape, he demanded they return all the money they had stolen. Realizing they had no chance against him, the bullies quickly complied. Within moments, the bullied boy had his money back. The boy was astonished, noticing that the amount returned was far more than what had been stolen. Ronan told him to keep it all, as he didn't need the extra money. Grateful, the boy thanked Ronan sincerely. As they spoke, Asel, the red-haired magic user, stood by, looking remorseful. He apologized to the boy, explaining that he had been too scared to disobey the bully's orders. Asel kept apologizing, making the boy feel awkward, but the boy smiled and reassured him. He revealed that he had understood Asel's situation all along and didn't hold him responsible. Asel's apologies were deeply appreciated, and after a brief farewell, the boy left, leaving Ronan and Asel alone. Ronan studied Asel for a moment, realizing that this person didn't seem like a typical boy. In fact, Ronan addressed Asel as a girl. Moving on to business, Ronan told Asel they should meet at the same spot again in 4 days. Asel tried to ask more questions, but Ronan offered no answers. Just before leaving, Ronan gave a final reminder. If Asel didn't show up, there would be consequences. He was now left alone, reflecting on everything that had just happened. For the moment, we'll refer to Asel as a boy, though Ronan still suspected otherwise. After a short walk, Ronan finally arrived at his home, carrying flowers for his sister. He recalled that she loved these particular blooms, but feeling a bit embarrassed, he almost tossed them aside. Just as he was about to, his sister spotted him and opened the door. Her voice stopped him in his tracks, leaving Ronan momentarily frozen, unsure of how to react. In his past life, after his sister's death, Ronan had often wondered what he would do if he ever had the chance to see her again. That regret had haunted him, but now, with this second chance, things were different. Here she was, standing before him, alive and smiling, her usual bright and gentle self. She was even pleased to see that he had returned home earlier than usual. All Ronan could manage to say was, "I'm back." Those were the only words that came to mind. Without missing a beat, his sister, Errol, began preparing food for him. She teased him playfully, saying she never expected to receive flowers from her brother. Ronan felt a pang of warmth as he watched her happiness over such a simple gift. He then asked her how old she was this year, trying to get a sense of the current timeline. Errol revealed she was 22 years old, and with that, Ronan realized he had about 10 years left before the giants would invade the world. Errol, noticing something off in his behavior, approached and checked his temperature, concerned by how strangely he was acting. But to Ronan, she was exactly as he remembered, bright, kind, and full of warmth. He silently wished that this peaceful moment could last forever. However, that thought reminded him of something important he needed to do. Summoning his resolve, Ronan told his sister that he had something serious to discuss. His sudden change in demeanor caught her by surprise. He then revealed that he planned to enroll in the academy. At first, Errol struggled to process the news, but once it sank in, her face lit up with joy. She was thrilled to hear this from her brother. Excitedly, she rushed off into another room, rummaging through their belongings until she found what she had been preparing for this very moment. Errol emerged holding a large pot. Curious, Ronan peeked inside, and to his astonishment, the pot was filled with coins. It was more than enough to cover the cost of his education at the academy. She had secretly been saving up to surprise him with this gift. Ronan hadn't anticipated such a gesture from his sister, and he was deeply moved by her thoughtfulness. He expressed his gratitude for her kindness, but gently informed her that the money she had saved still wouldn't be enough. Ronan then mentioned the name of the academy he wanted to attend, the Imperial Institution, Philin Academy. Hearing this, Errol's face shifted from confusion to shock, and she let out a loud gasp as she realized what her brother was aiming for. Philin Academy was the Empire's most prestigious educational institution, renowned for its elite professors and massive imperial funding. It was also known as the Hero Factory. Many legendary figures had graduated from Philin Academy, including Grand Commander Aesan herself, the famed Swordmaster Shalafan, and even the notorious criminal Winter Witch. Ronan knew that these individuals had all played key roles in humanity's struggle against the Giants. The academy had even been personally recommended by Aesan. However, Philin Academy was infamous for its extremely high entrance requirements and exorbitant tuition fees. Despite these challenges, Ronan was determined to give it his best shot, especially with Errol cheering him on so enthusiastically. Her support fueled his determination to pass the entrance exam and prove that he could make it. As Ronan was heading out, he encountered someone unexpected, Assel. Ronan, in a moment of light teasing, mistakenly called him Missile, which Assel quickly corrected. The red-haired boy had come because of Ronan's rather intimidating threat, though Ronan hadn't intended to scare him. Since Assel had shown up, Ronan told him they would be busy that evening for a test, something that took Assel by surprise, as he hadn't expected anything like this. Ronan explained that he wanted Assel to use his telekinesis on him, asking Assel to lift him as high as possible. Assel, concerned about the danger, hesitated, warning Ronan that it could be risky. However, Ronan was confident that he would be fine if Assel followed his instructions. Reluctantly, Assel cast the spell. Using a technique called the Invisible Hand, he directed his magic toward Ronan. To Ronan's amazement, he could actually feel the magic's grip on his body. His feet slowly lifted off the ground, and within seconds, Ronan was soaring higher. The sensation was thrilling. It reminded Ronan of the feeling he had experienced when battling giants, though the height and stability of the spell were not quite the same. Nevertheless, telekinesis was a crucial ability that could give him the edge he needed in combat against the towering foes. With his own abilities and Assel's telekinesis, Ronan realized he was closer to being ready for the battles ahead. Assel, now straining to maintain the spell, was clearly reaching his limit. Despite this, Ronan urged him to hold on just a bit longer as he wanted to test one last thing. The protagonist drew his weapon and, without warning, slashed through the air. Assel stood in awe, realizing that Ronan had just cut through his mana, disrupting the telekinesis spell. As soon as Ronan landed, Assel couldn't help but ask how he had performed such an incredible feat. This was the first time he had witnessed someone sever mana with a blade. However, Ronan had no clear answers. He, too, was unsure why or how this phenomenon occurred. He suspected that his mysterious ability was something he needed to explore further, though it wasn't a priority at the moment. His current theory was that his sword, Sworder, had the capability to cut through mana, but unraveling the truth behind it would have to wait. After this brief test, Ronan declared that Assel had passed. He handed Assel a spare bag and informed him that they had a critical task to complete before the moon vanished. This mission, Ronan explained, was of such importance that it could be considered the first chapter in his life story. With that, the two of them set off on their journey. During their conversation, Ronan shared his plans about enrolling in Philin Academy. Assel, still taken aback, tried to clarify what he had heard, as Philin Academy only admitted the Empire's top-tier individuals. Ronan grew irritated with Assel's repeated questions, but he confirmed that his plan was real. He then asked if Assel had any intention of joining the Academy as well. Assel confessed that he did want to enroll, but he lacked confidence in his abilities. He saw himself as talentless, timid, and overly fearful. Ronan, however, had little patience for this self-pity. He bluntly asked Assel if he really wanted to continue living this way. This question struck a chord in Assel, making him realize that he was indeed wasting his potential. Ronan didn't sugarcoat things. He acknowledged that Assel had a tendency to be fearful and emotional, but none of that mattered. What mattered, Ronan explained, was that Assel still had the chance to change. Ronan reminded him that time was the most valuable resource anyone had. Every moment that passed was something they could never get back, and if Assel didn't start making changes now, he would one day regret everything. Ronan's words were deeply personal, coming from his own experiences and regrets in his previous life. He had lived a life full of missed opportunities, and now, with a second chance, he understood the cost of inaction. He then asked Assel if he was ready to make those changes. Assel, surprised by the depth of Ronan's concern for him, remained silent for a moment, processing everything. But just as Ronan began to walk away, Assel finally responded, saying what Ronan had been waiting to hear. Assel, determined to change, declared that he would accompany Ronan to Philin Academy. Ronan turned back to him with a grin, remarking that this was the first time Assel had shown real courage. But in truth, everything was going according to Ronan's plan. It was written all over his face. That night, their first mission began. After a quick briefing from Ronan, Assel found himself ready, though anxious. The two were quietly observing their target. This was the first challenge Assel had to face in order to improve his abilities. Ronan had chosen a suitable adversary, the lunar goblins. These creatures, easily distinguished from regular goblins by their yellow skin, were notorious for their obsession with gold and treasure. They often ambushed traders to steal goods and held elaborate celebrations when they hoarded enough treasure, especially under the full moon. And tonight was a full moon, the perfect opportunity for Ronan's plan. With a determined look, Ronan announced that they would be stealing the goblins' treasure. Assel, trembling slightly, was confused and terrified by the task. He'd never heard of the lunar goblins' festivals before, and he asked Ronan how he knew about this. Ronan couldn't explain. His knowledge came from his past life. But he reassured Assel, wrapping an arm around him and explaining that all they needed was for Assel to use his telekinesis to quietly move the treasure into their bags. Assel, however, wasn't so confident. He worried that any mistake could wake the goblins, which would put them in a dire situation. He even asked Ronan to reconsider, but Ronan dismissed his fears, calling him scared. Then he laid out the importance of the mission. They needed two things to get into Philin Academy: money and battle experience. The aristocrats who attended the academy had been trained since birth, so if they wanted to compete, they needed to take risks and face real danger. Fighting the lunar goblins would not only give them the funds they needed, but it would also provide valuable experience, a perfect opportunity. With no other options, Assel reluctantly agreed, though he couldn't help but cry under the pressure. Ronan's logic was sound, and Assel knew deep down that there was no turning back. As instructed, he began casting his telekinesis. The night remained still and silent as, one by one, the goblins' treasures floated into their bags. Assel concentrated hard, desperate not to make a mistake, while Ronan watched with a satisfied smile. The treasure chest was almost empty, and their bags were now full and even glowing from the sheer amount of riches inside. When the final piece was secured, Ronan praised Assel for his remarkable effort, though in truth, he had always believed Assel was capable of pulling it off. As they finished packing, Ronan couldn't help but slip up again, referring to Assel as her, once more, thinking to himself that this girl was more impressive than he had expected. His expression shifted, his eyes and grin turning slightly sinister, as he considered what a valuable ally, or minion, he had gained. With their mission complete, Ronan gathered their loot, and they prepared to head out, their first test a resounding success. Ronan turned to Assel and said they should head back quickly before anything went wrong. However, it seemed Ronan had jinxed it, as something began to stir in the forest. Two men sprinted through the woods, chasing after a bird. Their loud voices immediately caught the attention of Ronan and Assel, who wondered who these strangers were and why they were causing such a commotion. Unfortunately, the ruckus woke up the goblins. Their leader quickly checked the treasure, and upon realizing it was gone, sounded the alarm. Within seconds, the entire group of goblins gathered, trying to figure out what had happened to their stash. They soon spotted two humans attempting to flee, Ronan and Assel. Realizing they had been spotted, Assel began to panic, collapsing to his knees in fear. Ronan, however, remained composed, refusing to abandon their bags of treasure. They needed the money for tuition, and running wasn't an option. As the goblins closed in, Ronan inspected his weapon, a longsword made of cheap steel, but sturdy enough to last through 15 strikes. Unfortunately, there were 30 goblins charging at them. Assel, frozen in terror, could only watch as the goblins prepared to attack. He called out to Ronan to be careful, but Ronan, undeterred, made a powerful wide slash, taking down 3 goblins in a single stroke, their heads separated from their bodies. Assel was in shock at the sight. Ronan, calm as ever, noted that he still had 14 attacks left. The crows in the forest cawed as they witnessed the massacre. One by one, the lunar goblins fell to Ronan's swordsmanship, their limbs severed. It was a display of sheer skill, leaving the goblins no chance of survival. Assel could hardly believe what he had seen. Ronan had taken down all 30 goblins by himself. The initial strike that felled 3 goblins had been just the beginning. As for the rest, Ronan had moved so swiftly that it seemed he vanished before swiftly dispatching each goblin. Assel marveled at his companion's genius in combat. When the battle was over, Ronan snapped Assel back to reality, reminding him not to zone out. With a smile, Ronan told him it was time to head home. The night was still young as they began their journey back, but the weight of the treasure-filled bags soon took its toll on their bodies. Ronan complained about his muscles aching after the brief fight and decided he would need to do some intense training the next day to strengthen himself. Curious about the earlier noise, Assel asked Ronan about it, but Ronan had no clear answer either. He was still irritated that the noise had disrupted their flawless plan. He mused that whoever had made the noise must have been crazy to shout so loudly in the middle of the night. As they continued walking, an arrow suddenly flew toward them, aimed at Assel. Though Assel noticed it, it was already too close for him to dodge. Fortunately, Ronan caught the arrow just in time, saving Assel from harm. Assel was shaken, realizing how close he had come to being hit. Ronan quickly scanned the area and spotted two figures, one of them holding a bow. Furious at being called kids by the strangers, Ronan watched as the two men approached. One of them apologized for firing the arrow, claiming they thought there were monsters nearby. His excuse sounded weak, and it became clear as he eyed the treasure in Ronan's bag that these two had ulterior motives. The two men exchanged a knowing glance, hinting at their intentions. The two men seemed to exchange a silent communication. Ronan wasn't fooled by their apologies. He recognized their deceit. With a serious expression, he confronted them, demanding to know who they were. The man with the bow was taken aback by the intensity of Ronan's response. He stepped closer, attempting to make small talk while subtly reaching for a concealed weapon. Moments later, he revealed their true intentions by swinging his weapon at Ronan. Ronan was familiar with the name Caliboro and reacted swiftly, seizing the man's wrist to thwart the attack. In one fluid motion, he countered with a punch that knocked the attacker out cold. Seeing his companion incapacitated, the second man charged at Ronan. Assel, noticing the incoming threat, used his telekinesis to grab Ronan's attention and at the last moment, cast a spell on the assailant. The man froze in place, bewildered by his sudden inability to move. Ronan couldn't help but smile at Assel's quick thinking. Seizing the opportunity, he disarmed the frozen attacker, snatching the dagger that clattered to the ground. The bewildered man didn't comprehend what had just transpired before Ronan dispatched him. A piercing scream echoed through the forest. Assel hesitantly asked if the attacker was dead, and Ronan confirmed that he had no intention of sparing someone who tried to kill them. He explained that the men were part of the notorious Caliboro group, known for their extensive history of crimes, including being the most ruthless poaching gang in the Empire. Ronan emphasized that they had to act decisively. If they didn't, it would be their organs being harvested instead. Allowing these criminals to leave, especially after uncovering their identities, would be a crime in itself. As they prepared to leave, Ronan sensed something unusual. The two noticed a bag moving erratically on the ground. Intrigued, they approached it, suspecting it might contain a poached animal. When Ronan unzipped the bag, a pair of glowing eyes met his gaze. Moments later, a blue creature burst out, soaring above them in the air. Ronan was baffled by the strange blue creature before him. Both he and Assel couldn't believe their eyes, initially thinking it was just an odd blue chicken. However, it turned out to be a charming blue bird. Assel was amazed, having never seen anything like it before. Ronan admitted he felt the same. As the bird fluttered around them, Ronan noticed a shackle on its leg. He recognized it as a Caliboro poaching device designed to disrupt the creature's mana and limit its movement. Ronan recalled that such shackles were typically employed on rare occasions, particularly when capturing mythical beasts. This realization made him think further. Suddenly, a mysterious voice emanated from the bird, accompanied by a glowing magic circle above its head. After a moment, the voice became clearer, claiming that a connection had finally been established. Both boys took a step back, startled. Assel was frightened, thinking the bird was speaking, but Ronan reassured him that it was merely a form of communication magic. Ronan then examined the bag the creature had come from, concluding that it might possess the ability to block mana. A figure then appeared, revealing itself as Varen, who was studying fantastical creatures at the institution. He introduced the bird as Marpus and mentioned that it had taken him quite some time to connect with it. Varen asked for their names, and Ronan replied they were merely passing through. He also recounted their encounter with the poachers who had kidnapped Marpus. He hesitated before detailing how they rescued the bird, deciding it was best to keep some things to himself. Varen was surprised that poachers had targeted his bird and expressed his gratitude to Ronan, though he wasn't sure how to repay him. Ronan insisted there was no need for that. They were just focused on returning Marpus. The blue bird looked exhausted, prompting Ronan to ask if it could fly well once the shackle was removed. Varen confirmed this, stating Marpus had great instincts and would find its way back without issue. With a quick motion, Ronan drew his sword and severed the shackle binding Marpus. He called to the bird, urging it to return to its owner, who was undoubtedly worried about it. The bird's eyes sparkled with gratitude, but before it could fly away, Ronan noticed something unusual. Marpus nudged toward him, which annoyed Ronan, leaving him puzzled about its intentions. Varen clarified that Marpus wanted him to pluck one of its feathers as a token, symbolizing its desire to meet its savior again. The feather would serve as a compass for the bird. After that, Marpus spread its wings and took off into the sky, leaving Varen to express his thanks and hopes that Ronan and Aesan would visit again soon. The bird soared away with incredible speed, a delightful smile on its face as it returned to Varen. Ronan was astonished at how fast it was. Aesan then pointed out that something was on Ronan's hand. Ronan shifted his focus to Aesan's comment, and both were puzzled by what was on Ronan's hand. A few days later, they arrived at a bustling caravan where merchants were busy loading and unloading goods for trade. Among them was an elderly man examining a jewel. This man, Duan Carbel, owner of Carbel Merchantry, offered 20 gold pieces for the jewel due to its quality and craftsmanship. He mentioned it must be his lucky day, speaking to Ronan and Aesan, who were selling the loot they had obtained from the goblins. Ronan was pleased to find someone appraising treasures fairly, unlike other merchants who tried to lowball him. As their negotiation concluded, Ronan reached into his pocket, wanting to see if Duan could appraise something else. He pulled out a mysterious egg with a shell resembling a galaxy. Mr. Duan began examining the egg, which turned out to be left behind by Marpus. This peculiar egg radiated a strange and powerful aura, and Ronan was uncertain of its significance. Initially, they both thought the blue bird had humorously left a gift, which annoyed Ronan, prompting him to throw the egg against a large rock. The impact was so forceful it shattered the rock without leaving a mark on the egg, leaving both Ronan and Aesan in disbelief. Returning to the present, Duan was still inspecting the egg while Ronan waited patiently, sensing it might be valuable. The old man concentrated, trying to deduce its nature, and Ronan's excitement grew as he anticipated discovering what the egg was. However, his hopes were dashed when Mr. Duan concluded it was merely horse manure. Ronan refuted this, but the old man insisted he didn't recognize it and recommended having it appraised at a specialized facility. This only piqued Ronan's curiosity further, leading him to decide against selling it. Meanwhile, Aesan continued to wonder if it truly was just a lump of waste. Ronan then inquired if the old man sold books about Filian Academy, sharing that they were preparing for the entrance exam and needed more information. Mr. Duan expressed delight, saying his daughter was also about to take the exam and could assist them. Moments later, a young woman appeared, asking her father what was happening. Duan introduced Ronan and Aesan as customers who had just completed a significant deal. The girl, Mara Carbel, the old man's only daughter, drew Ronan's attention immediately. He was captivated by her striking appearance, green eyes, and a sharp profile. Duan introduced them, but then scolded Mara for her brusque manner. He apologized for her behavior, explaining that she had grown up in commerce and often spoke bluntly. Aesan assured the old man it was all fine, but Ronan stepped forward, questioning Mara's identity. He asked if she was indeed Mara, to which she affirmed. Even revealing her middle name was Senator Mara was curious how Ronan knew this. Lost in thought, Ronan recalled someone from his past who bore a resemblance to her, but was built quite differently. He decided to ask Mara a more personal question and leaned closer, whispering to her about a specific detail. Ronan directly asked Mara if she had a deek, catching her off guard. She thought it was a ridiculous question, but Ronan's serious expression indicated he wasn't joking. After a moment of surprise, Mara processed the question, leaving her momentarily speechless. Ronan then remarked that, from what he could see, it seemed she didn't have one, which only irritated her further. As he contemplated other possibilities that might prove him wrong, a blurry shape approached. It was Mara's hand. She swatted him and told him to be quiet. Ronan didn't have time to dodge, and the slap brought back a familiar pain. Looking at her again, he noticed she bore a striking resemblance to someone from his past. Count Mara Senator Ronan had met Mara's son when he was a disciplinary soldier in a Marlin, where she managed supplies. They had a good rapport, thanks to her easygoing nature, but she became uncharacteristically angry whenever the soldiers talked about deeks. Ronan recalled that she had a habit of swatting at people when annoyed, which piqued his curiosity back then, but he never got the chance to ask her about it. She had died in the war long before he did, fighting against the angels. In the present, Ronan smiled, realizing he had the answer about Mara. Her behavior stemmed from being mistaken for a boy. The soldiers all assumed she was one of them. Mara noticed Ronan's smile, and it only frustrated her more. She approached him to teach him a lesson, but he playfully swatted her head, causing her to halt in her tracks. He told her to quit acting up since she had already hit him once, but this warning didn't deter her. She retaliated with a strong headbutt, reigniting their playful fight. They resembled two kids squabbling over a piece of candy, leaving Aesan and Mr. Duan in disbelief as they watched. Eventually, the two calmed down and gathered inside a tent. Aesan wore a perplexed expression, wondering how they were now acting like old friends after their earlier tussle. Ronan and Mara continued their conversation, this time discussing their weapons. Mara offered her insights on their effective use and asked Ronan why he was carrying 3 swords and a magic wand. Ronan explained that he relied heavily on his swords and needed backups in case one broke. Mara assessed the 3 swords and determined that the black iron sword was the best. She noted that black iron was known for its durability, and many knights sought such weapons. This was also the first time Ronan realized he owned a black iron sword, which had been his favorite. Mara continued, saying the wand had a magic stone embedded in it. Then she turned to Asel and asked if he was the rare mage Ronan had mentioned. Asel confirmed this, albeit nervously. Curious, Mara inquired about the type of magic he could perform. Asel replied that he specialized in telekinesis. This revelation shocked Mara, as she recognized how rare that ability was among mages. She suggested he could easily earn a scholarship with such talent. She then shifted the conversation back to Ronan, saying they were the only concern for the upcoming practical exam. She asked what he planned to demonstrate to impress the judges, particularly techniques that would capture their interest. Ronan realized he was unaware of this requirement. Mara explained that candidates needed to impress the professors and demonstrate their capabilities during the practical exam. She emphasized that even if someone didn't excel in the theory portion, they could still pass if they performed well in practice. She added that if applicants couldn't prove their worth, they should just forget about attending the academy. Ronan sighed, feeling this only complicated matters, believing that a swordsman simply needed to be skilled with a sword. The two then discussed the typical demonstrations in the practical exam, where applicants usually showcase their family's secret techniques. Mara noted that some even displayed their personal mana fighting styles. Ronan interrupted, questioning the concept of mana. This left Mara dumbfounded by his reaction. She explained that anyone hoping to enroll in Philin Academy should at least be able to use mana. As she spoke, Ronan's expression showed his lack of understanding about the basic requirements for the entrance exam. It dawned on Mara that he couldn't sense his own mana. Her body trembled in disbelief, and her theory was confirmed when Ronan confused mana with aura. She couldn't believe someone could be so clueless before attempting to enter Philin Academy, and she buried her face in frustration. Ronan questioned why she was making such a big deal about it, insisting he might know what she was referring to. Mara stood up and instructed Ronan to step outside, which left him confused. She grabbed the 2 short swords from the table, explaining that she had left her own weapon at the blacksmith. This made Ronan uneasy, as he worried she might damage his swords. However, she assured him that she'd finish whatever she was doing before that could happen, even promising to compensate him 3 times over if she broke them. With a resigned sigh, Ronan understood there was no stopping her. Mara urged Ronan to hurry outside as she planned to give him special training. In this world, mana is the essence of nature's power. It's present everywhere, but not everyone can harness it. To use mana, one must see and feel it, a process known as mana sense. Achieving this usually requires rigorous training and can take about a year. Those who master this early often apply to Philin Academy. Mara conveyed this basic information to Ronan, warning him that if he couldn't even differentiate between mana and aura, he should forget about entering Philin. Outside, they both readied their weapons. She continued, explaining that aura is a type of mana, yet the distinction is significant. The innate power gained through intense effort is called aura. She asked Ronan if he grasped any of this. Ronan recalled countless individuals in his past life who claimed to be aura users and wielded strange powers, finding them both irritating and impressive. However, those powers had never been enough to defeat him. His thoughts returned to the present as Mara declared it was time to begin their training, insisting he would learn quicker by using his body rather than overthinking. Initially dismissive, Ronan didn't think much of Mara because she seemed so young, but in a flash, she closed the gap between them, showcasing extraordinary speed. Caught off guard, Ronan's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. He managed to defend against her attack, but he was clearly at a disadvantage. Locking eyes with Mara, he recognized the fierce expression that reminded him of a past encounter. They began exchanging blows, displaying impressive swordsmanship that put them almost on equal footing. Ronan was taken aback by Mara's power at such a young age, especially since she wielded 2 swords. He wondered if she was indeed using mana as she had claimed. The trouble was, he couldn't tell because he lacked the ability to see or sense mana. Meanwhile, Mara was in shock. Her original plan was to end the fight quickly, but it had dragged on much longer than expected. Even though she was using mana, Ronan was holding his ground against all her attacks. She wanted him to experience defeat. She didn't want him to face humiliation during the entrance exam. Mara had intended to help him, but now her strategy was backfiring. She didn't anticipate someone who couldn't sense mana could possess such strength. While still trying to comprehend the situation, Ronan asked her how she thought he was performing. He deflected her sword with a fierce look, signaling that he was ready to finish the battle. He warned Mara to dodge his next attack and not to attempt to block it. Luckily, her body reacted instinctively, allowing her to step back just in time. The attack nearly cost her life. She smiled, admitting that Ronan's strike could have been a serious issue, realizing then that he was no ordinary opponent. Ronan reciprocated her compliment, stating that she was skilled even without using mana. However, he pointed out that she was still struggling to find her balance. He suggested that once she addressed that issue, she would improve significantly. Just as he was about to leave, Mara stopped him, still sulking and insisting their fight wasn't over. Ronan, however, showed no interest. As soon as he voiced his indifference, cracks began to appear in her sword. Confused, she looked down at the weapon she had used against him, eyes widening in realization of its damage. Ronan reminded her of her promise to replace the swords if she lost. Mara was about to argue again when someone else caught her attention, a fellow merchant who praised her efforts against Ronan, clearly understanding her frustration. Ronan then called for the merchant to rest, and the two left Mara standing alone, pondering what Ronan really was. The next day, Ronan and Aesan returned to the market to collect the promised sword from Mara. However, as he approached, he was puzzled by what lay before him. Along with the swords, Mara had also taken the initiative to provide them with books essential for the entrance exam. These were summarized notes, and she insisted they would need them since the exam was just a month away. As Aesan's eyes sparkled with excitement, Ronan asked Mara why she was doing this. He warned her that he suspected she was playing a prank. Mara tried to reassure him, explaining that she genuinely liked them and wanted all three to succeed at the academy. She added that everything she provided was free of charge. Although she wanted to teach them herself, her life as a merchant made that difficult, as she had to constantly travel for trade. Mara playfully bumped her fist against Ronan's, wishing them good luck and urging them to study hard. She also teasingly warned that she wouldn't let them off easy if they failed the exam. Ronan smiled, telling Mara that she didn't need to go out of her way and should focus on herself. Moments later, she was already in the carriage, informing Ronan and Aesan that they would see each other at the imperial capital for the exam. Aesan waved goodbye, and as all this unfolded, Ronan found himself lost in thought. He realized he had trained his once weak body and now just needed to study. Though these preparations weren't part of his previous life, he didn't mind them. This marked the beginning of his new journey. Once back home, Ronan's days resumed their usual rhythm, but felt slightly different. Unlike before, he now shared meals with his sister, Errol, relishing each moment he had missed. He ate until he was full, enjoying every bite, and burned off those calories by hunting monsters around the village. This approach significantly boosted his stamina and adaptability. Since returning to this timeline, he had come a long way, even managing to drive all the monsters around the village to extinction. After hunting, he dedicated time to studying, a task he never would have considered as a soldier. Although uncertain if all this effort would pay off, he promised to give it his all. A month passed, and they finally arrived at the setting of this tale, the magnificent imperial capital Balon, home to the finest educational institution in the empire, Philin Academy, situated in the heart of the city. Aesan stood in front of the impressive building, in disbelief as if he were dreaming. Today marked their entry into Philin Academy, and he marveled at the artistry of the place. While still in awe, his daydream was interrupted by a familiar voice urging him to stop acting like a country bumpkin and just go inside. Aesan was happy to see this friend again, but noticed something different about Ronan. He seemed to carry a newfound strength and aura, having grown significantly over the month. Ronan, growing impatient, suggested they keep moving. As he approached the academy, he recalled someone from his past, a sword saint named Shulipin, a member of the renowned swordsmanship clan Grancia, and considered the strongest in the empire. Ronan thought that since Shulipin was around his age, he might run into him here, but he decided to leave that to fate. Aesan interrupted his thoughts, asking if Ronan had brought the item they needed. Aesan was referring to the feather plucked from the bird they saved that night, which was supposed to help them locate its owner. Ronan pulled out the feather and suggested they find the owner first before heading to the examination area. Ronan noticed that the feather was pointing upwards, indicating that the person they needed to meet lived at the top of the building. Meanwhile, on the top floor, someone was grumbling about the burdens of being a professor. This individual had the bird that Rowan and Aesan rescued perched on his shoulder, which began to chirp as it sensed its saviors had arrived in the capital. The bird's owner, a werlion named Varen Fanasir, was the zoology professor at Philin Academy. Just as Varen was about to open the window for some fresh air, he was startled to see Rowan's face greet him from outside. Shocked, Varen instinctively trembled, not expecting someone to enter through the window. He demanded that Rowan reveal his identity. As they settled inside, Rowan complained about the werelion's booming voice, which nearly deafened him, while Aesan was still catching his breath from the climb. Varen, still a bit fearful, inquired if they were after his blue bird, Marpus. Upon examining them closely, he noticed the feather Rowan was holding, and his expression brightened as he recognized his unexpected guess as the heroes who saved Marpus from poachers. The werelion professor began apologizing profusely for his earlier behavior until Rowan told him to forget it. Rowan even shifted some of the blame for their unconventional entrance to Aesan, revealing that they had used Aesan's telekinesis to float up the tower, though he hesitated to fully explain the situation. Changing the subject, Rowan expressed surprise that a rare werelion like Varen owned the blue bird and was also a professor. Varen, in turn, remarked that he hadn't expected the heroes of Marpus to be applicants of Philin Academy. He added that had he known, he would have written them a recommendation letter to ease their admission process. However, Ronan was less interested in that, and instead wanted to ask Varen about something specific. He produced the unusual purple object he had found earlier, which puzzled Varen. Upon closer inspection, Varen realized it was a dream bird egg. He marveled at the egg, as Ronan initially thought it was just an ordinary egg. Varen explained that this was no regular egg. It was a dream egg, the contents of which were unknown until it hatched. He elaborated that while ordinary eggs would typically yield birds, a dream egg absorbed its environment's unique mana to determine what would emerge. For example, if it absorbed lava, it might hatch a fiery phoenix, or if it drew mana from a monster's nest, it could produce a new kind of creature. There were even instances where it might not resemble a bird at all. Varen added that he could predict what might hatch by observing the mana within, but this egg was particularly unique. The variety and quantity of mana present were astounding, featuring even rainbow colors, making it impossible for him to determine the outcome at that moment. Ronan felt overwhelmed by the professor's detailed explanation, commenting that Varen was attributing too much significance to a mere egg. His attention then shifted to Marpus, and he wondered why the bird would lay such an egg and leave it in his care. In his mind, he thought he had never encountered a bird so audacious. Varen then disclosed that he wanted Ronan to continue looking after the egg. To his surprise, Ronan agreed without hesitation, learning that the egg was incredibly precious. A dream bird only laid one egg in its lifetime, signifying Marpus's next generation. Varen believed it was fitting that Marpus chose to lay its egg in front of its heroes, recognizing the special bond it felt with Ronan. Since Marpus had been Varen's companion for years, he wished to honor the bird's choice by entrusting the egg to Ronan. He pondered what type of creature might emerge from the egg. The two then stood up, ready to leave as the exam time approached. Varen asked them to wait a moment. He had been considering what to give them as a token of gratitude for saving Marpus, and came up with something he believed would be useful. The professor pulled out an ancient-looking piece of parchment, surprising Ronan and Essel. Shortly after, the two departed from Varen's building and made their way to the main hall of Galilean Castle, where the practical testing was held. Inside, all the applicants were gathered in the waiting area. The facilitator announced that applicant number 111 had completed their exam, while many hopeful candidates waited anxiously for their turn, some even praying before entering the examination hall. The next applicant appeared visibly nervous, facing the vast hall beyond the doors. Ronan, waiting for his turn, found himself growing bored with the lengthy queue, remarking that they were making him wait too long. Beside him was Maria, the blonde girl he recognized, who was also waiting for her chance. He asked her why she was dressed that way, to which she proudly explained that Philian Academy is a prestigious institution for nobles, so she paid careful attention to her attire. She was hoping to attract a wealthy patron for their merchant business, so her preparation wouldn't go to waste. Maria sighed, wishing to be in the magic testing hall instead, which was located in a different building. After a moment, applicant number 112 finished their practical exam. The facilitator called for the next candidate. Realizing it was his turn, Ronan quickly stood up. Maria encouraged him to remain calm and do his best, playfully warning him that if he failed, she wouldn't let him off easily. He thanked her for her ironic support and turned to assure her he would return. Inside the practical exam room, various banners representing different academy organizations adorned the walls. Ronan scanned the room and noticed 5 professors who would judge whether the applicants were worthy of attending the academy. While they appeared to be ordinary individuals, one stood out: the elderly man in the center, Krabakratir, the headmaster of Philian Academy and an archmage. Another notable figure was the swordsmanship instructor, Nabos, the Grand Sword Saint, whose presence exuded an energy Ronan hadn't felt in ages. After assessing the instructors, Ronan introduced himself, and the professors reciprocated. Krava then explained the exam's instructions. Ronan's task was simple: strike the magically enhanced dummy in front of him and showcase any techniques he had learned. As he prepared, he told the professors not to expect anything extraordinary, just a swift cut. His casual remark left the professors puzzled. Most applicants demonstrated techniques involving mana. Amused, the other professors began chuckling, remarking that there was always one applicant like this. One of them quipped that it was typical, especially for someone from a distant region. The dummy appeared ordinary, but it was anything but. Engineered to withstand aura-based attacks, it also had rapid regeneration capabilities. This training dummy was a marvel of magical engineering. 2 professors whispered that even the prodigy Shalapin barely made a mark on the dummy with his sword. Krava, embarrassed by their behavior, silently hoped Ronan would surprise them. From Krava's perspective, something felt different as Ronan stood in front of the dummy. There was an unusual energy radiating from the young man. In an instant, Ronan made his move, delivering a single precise strike. It felt as if time had momentarily paused. His cut was so clean and powerful that even Nabos, the swordsmanship instructor, sensed its force and was visibly startled. Ronan, having completed his demonstration, casually informed the professors that he was finished and had nothing more to show. The professors, still laughing and underestimating him, remarked that a simple cut wouldn't suffice to pass. One blonde professor sought confirmation from the headmaster, but Krava was already in shock, sweat forming on his brow as he stared at Ronan in disbelief. Suddenly, Instructor Nabairos, the Grand Sword Saint, kicked her leg up onto the table, stunning the other professors. In a flash, she vanished from her spot and reappeared in front of Ronan with a fierce expression, her blade poised to strike. With all her strength, she halted her attack just before it could hit. Ronan remained unfazed, standing calmly, as if nothing had happened. Ronan then remarked, with a touch of irony, that Nabairos had given him quite a scare. With a serious expression, Nabairos asked who he was and where he had learned his swordsmanship.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on upcoming videos. Leave a like if you enjoyed it and share with your friends. See you in the next video. Bye for now.